Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. While much of the world is free to explore, there are several places that you cannot go, whether they're too dangerous to set foot on or house top secrets for the government. The places in today's video are absolutely forbidden for you to ever visit. So let's begin. Here are the top 15 most amazing places in the world that you are not allowed to visit. Number 15. Snake Island, Brazil. Alright, imagine an island seething and slithering with menacing snakes. Now, imagine the island is so full of snakes that there are literally 5 snakes for every 3 square feet of land. Oh, and did I mention that these snakes are one of the most poisonous snakes in the world? Yeah, welcome to Snake Island, Brazil, an island so full of deadly snakes that the only way to visit it is through pictures. The island is officially called Queimada Grande, and it's a small island in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Brazil. Measuring in at 110 acres, the entire island is entirely off limits to visitors. The snakes that live there are golden lancehead pit vipers, scientifically known as Bothrops insularis. These snakes have become trapped on the island when rising sea levels separated the island from the mainland. Since then, the vipers have evolved and slithered freely, and if the sheer volume of snakes on Snake Island isn't enough to scare you off, then perhaps a few more details about their venomous bite will. Golden lancehead pit vipers account for 95% of deaths caused by snake bites in Brazil. 95%! Their venom is so potent that it melts the flesh around the bite wound, and one bite's enough to kill a fully grown man within hours. And seeing as how the island is chock full of them, chances of your survival are slim to none. Which is why Snake Island, Brazil is one of the most restricted areas on the planet. Number 14. North Sentinel Island. Alright, here it is again, North Sentinel Island in the Indian archipelago in the Bay of Bengal. There's an island, and on that island there are people, but unlike every other humans on the planet, these are people in voluntary isolation. So no, you cannot go visit them. The island is called North Sentinel Island, and it's one of the Andaman Islands. The people that live there are called the Sentinelese, and they are the last people in the world who are completely and utterly untouched by modern civilization. They live in complete isolation from the rest of the world, and they like it that way. In fact, according to sources, they will defend their anonymity with spears and arrows, which they reserve the right to do. It's not that they're being overly aggressive, it's just that they ask that no one visit them. So when people ignore their requests, they have no choice but to protect themselves with force. The entire island is restricted, and the people who live there are protected under the Andaman and Nicobar Regulation of 1995. One of the reasons they're protected is that if we were to visit them, they would be very vulnerable to our diseases since they've never had exposure to any of our illnesses. But the main reason we can't visit North Sentinel Island is that they simply don't want us there. Number 13. Area 51. 80 miles northwest of Las Vegas in the desert of Lincoln County, Nevada, is one of the most secretive, most restricted, and most controversial areas in the world. Area 51 may be physically surrounded by vacant desert, but its restricted area is swarming with so many conspiracy theories that it's become a magnet for UFO enthusiasts and believers of the beyond for decades. Alien enthusiasts make the trek hoping to get a sneak peek into what lay inside the gates of Area 51, because one of the most common conspiracy theories here is that Area 51 actually has extraterrestrial life, or has had over the years. So people actually go there hoping to catch a glimpse of an otherworldly creature. Yeah, good luck with that though. Patrolled by pickup trucks with scary-looking guards donning camo fatigues, the area is basically impenetrable. Curious onlookers can look at the perimeter of Area 51, but that's about it. Visitors can only use their imaginations and guess what's inside. In fact, there's some pretty clear signage around the area warning people that deadly force is authorized against trespassers. Should you manage to somehow step foot inside this highly restricted area, you could face prison time. Whispers about Area 51 have been circulating for years, but oddly enough, this place is so secretive, the CIA didn't even publicly admit it existed until 2013. Number 12. Mount Weather, United States. Should there be a national emergency or a full-out apocalypse, most of us commoners would scramble to find a safe place to stay or hide out. But not the elite civilian and military officials. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center is the center of operations for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Mount Weather is sometimes referred to as the High Point Special Facility, and it's located near Bluemont, Virginia. The facility is controlled by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and it is where the highest level of civilian and military officials, aka the really important people, will be relocated to in case of some sort of natural disaster. This place is so secret that it wasn't even made known to the public until 1974, when a Boeing 727 crashed into it. It's been in use since 1959, though. Mount Weather has an underground bunker that was built in 1958. This bunker has a hospital, sleeping quarters, dining rooms, recreational facilities, a crematorium, just in case, and an emergency power plant, plus a reservoir for drinking water. So anyone brought there during a disaster, such as a nuclear war, can hunker down in the bunker and live out the disaster. The rest of us? Yeah, no dice. Mount Weather is a highly restricted area that the average person is not allowed to visit. Number 11. Svalbard Global Seed Vault. If all of the crops on the planet were somehow simultaneously wiped out, we needn't panic, thanks to the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This highly restricted vault currently houses more than 1.5 million seed varieties. Wheat, potato, rice, corn, eggplant, you name it, and it's probably there. In fact, there are seeds from varieties that aren't even in general use anymore, as well as the DNA traits to make new strains that could overcome future challenges in a particular region, or just general whole world problems. Yet needless to say, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault is our way of safeguarding ourselves against an unknown future from a food standpoint. It's also known as the Doomsday Vault. The goal of the vault is to safeguard as much of the world's agricultural biodiversity as possible, and as such, it's got the largest collection of seeds in the world, with seeds from countries all over. Now, it's highly unlikely that you would find yourself in a position where you'd venture to drop in on the vault. It's way up north, even further north than Santa Claus, in the frozen expanse above the Arctic Circle on an icy island, somewhere between Norway and the North Pole. Svalbard is far north as you can go on a commercial flight, and the vault itself is in a mountain on an island, so it's not exactly ripe with eager visitors. But still, if you wanted to see all the seeds for yourself, you're not allowed. The seeds are too important. Yeah, we might need them one day to replant the world. Number 10. The Red Zone, France. Zone Rouge, a haunting reminder of the Battle of Verdun and the destructive nature of war. The Red Zone in France is off-limits to visitors. The Battle of Verdun happened during World War I in 1916, and it was the longest sustained conflict of the entire war. The battle was bloody, one of the bloodiest of the war, and it dragged on for 300 days, taking the lives of 300,000 French and German soldiers with it. The fighting was intense, the shelling was constant, and the landscape was forever changed by the battle. The Red Zone stretches for 42,000 acres, and today there are no human residents. Before the war, the zone was a lovely expanse of agricultural farmland and quaint villages. But as the battle raged on, everything was destroyed, including the villages, the landscape, and even the ground itself. Today, the Red Zone is a desolate wasteland. The area is still full of unexploded shells, which pose too much of a danger to any potential visitors. Some believe the area is so damaged that it will take 300 years to fully clean it up. Others believe it will never be safe. As such, this is a place that's only best seen in pictures. Number 9. Pine Gap, Australia. About 11 miles southwest of Alice Springs, Northern Territory, smack dab in the center of Australia, is a satellite surveillance base and Australian Earth station that you're not allowed to visit. Formerly known as the Joint Defence Space and Research Facility, Pine Gap is run jointly by Australian government and officials, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the U.S. National Security Agency, and the U.S. National Reconnaissance Office. Pine Gap is significant because it controls United States spy satellites while they pass over a third of the Earth. The location was chosen because it's far too remote for spy ships to intercept signals, so Pine Gap's location means it's tucked away enough for it to gather the information it needs freely. Basically, Pine Gap can spy without being spied on. Pine Gap was founded in the 1970s, and because the place is so secretive, there are a lot of rumors and speculations as to what actually goes on there. As far as the public knows, though, Pine Gap collects sources of intelligence. In any case, you can't go there. It's highly restricted. That, of course, doesn't stop some people from trying to spy on what exactly Pine Gap is spying on. Number 8. Meskurai, Russia. If you thought the infamous Area 51 was the only one of its kind, then think again. Russia has its own mysterious and highly restricted area, but this one's an entire town. Meskurai was founded in the 1990s, and it's nestled away in the Ural Mountains and is reportedly around 400 square miles. So what goes on behind closed doors in this top-secret town? Well, no one really knows for sure, but some concrete facts can lead us to believe that whatever it is, it's probably not good. For example, Meskurai once stored 73 nuclear warheads, SS-23s to be exact, which are 350 times more powerful than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The warheads were dismantled, but Meskurai is apparently home to the Dead Hand Project, an advanced system that can both aim and launch missiles without human help. So it's basically an automatic nuclear weapons control system. Furthermore, it's believed by some that because the town is built on Mount Yamantau, which is the highest mountain in the southern Ural section, the Russians have actually built right into the mountain, creating vast bunkers and possibly an entire railway and highway system. There's also enough supplies and space in this restricted town, according to some sources, to house 60,000 people for months. Since no one's allowed to go there, it's hard to verify any of these rumors, as well as anything really that's happening there. Number 7. Korean Demilitarized Zone. Although the name of the Korean Demilitarized Zone might lead you to believe that it's not military-centric, the zone is anything but. The Korean Demilitarized Zone is a fully manned strip of land that extends for 160 miles. It lies between North and South Korea, and it was built in 1953 as a barrier between North and South Korea. Inside the DMZ, as it's called for short, is the Panmunjom, home to the Joint Security Area, or the JSA. This is where the famous Bridge of No Return is, a place where prisoner exchanges have happened in the past. The JSA also hosts the conference rooms where the United Nations commands, mostly Americans and South Koreans, and North Koreans meet. The DMZ isn't really a place most of us would want to visit. There have been a lot of incidents over the years, and several deaths. There's been a lot of propaganda, including loudspeaker propaganda and the famous balloon propaganda leaflet campaign, both of which were eventually halted. Heavily militarized with no-fly zones and massive landmine fields and buffer zones, the DMZ is the most heavily fortified border on the planet. For those that are intent on seeing this famous border for themselves, there are a few tours available, although those tours will only take you to a very small part of the zone, so you won't really see the zone per se, you'll just see what they want you to see. Number 6. The Lasko Caves. If seeing 20,000-year-old Paleolithic cave paintings for yourself is on your bucket list, sorry, you're out of luck. At least you're at the Lasko Caves. It's located on the Dordogne region of southwestern France in a cave complex. The Lasko Caves hold priceless cave paintings, almost 2,000 of them in total, in specific sections like the Great Hall of Bulls, the Lateral Passage, the Shaft of the Dead Men, the Painted Gallery, the Chamber of Engravings, and the Chamber of Felines. The paintings are grouped into 3 categories: human figures, animals, and abstract signs. The cave was actually found by accident in 1940 by 4 teenage boys. They were looking for buried treasure in the forest when they followed their dog down into the cave entrance. And even though it wasn't the type of treasure the boys were hoping to find, the Lasko Caves have become one of the most revered treasures for historians. The caves and their priceless paintings and drawings were once open for public viewing, but like so many beautiful and priceless things on the planet, people started to wreck the caves, so they were closed in 1963. Only really special people can go in now, like esteemed historians and revered archaeologists. Yeah, I know it's a drag, but don't despair. If you really want to see some really old Paleolithic cave paintings, you can visit a knockoff. The Lasko Caves 2 is an exact replica of the original caves built for public viewing. It's basically the same as the original caves, except that it's not, because it was made by modern man, not Paleolithic people. Number 5. Heard Island. Humans, we've pretty much spread ourselves out all over the world. There are a few regions left untouched by us, though, in some way, shape, or form, which is why the few remaining untouched places are so important. Heard Island is truly remarkable, though, as its remote location makes it one of the few places in the world untouched by man. And scientists are making sure that it stays that way. Heard Island is completely a hands-off area. It's about 1,000 miles north of the Antarctic continent, in the middle of the southern Indian Ocean. The island's about 142 square miles, and it's actually an active volcano that's covered in glaciers. The volcano is named Big Ben, and yeah, it's pretty big. It stands at 2,700 meters high. It is really hard to access this island. By boat, it takes roughly 2 weeks from Australia, and the trip takes passengers through some of the most frigid and roughest waters in the world. Extremely isolated, majorly windy, and ridiculously cold, yet this island has no human residents. It is, however, home to some pretty unique animals and marine life. Heard Island was once claimed by Britain, but she transferred the island to Australia in 1947. The island, along with the McDonald Islands, were proclaimed a World Heritage Site in 1997. And Heard Island is located within an IUCN-1, a strict nature reserve, so only people who have been granted a permit from the Australian Antarctic Division can even visit here. Number 4. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Want to see what radioactively contaminated areas look like? Then pictures will have to suffice, because the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone is not a place you're allowed to visit. When a radiation leak at the Chernobyl power plant wreaked havoc in 1986, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone was created. This Chernobyl disaster was the most disastrous nuclear accident in history, and the effects of it can still be seen today. The disaster stemmed from a combination of a flawed reactor design and improperly trained personnel. During the incident, 5% of the radioactive reactor's core was released into the surrounding environment. People died, plant life died, insects, animals, anything within a 1,000 square miles zone was affected by this radiation. This exclusion zone will stay uninhabitable for at least 3,000 more years, according to scientists. There are some areas that can be visited with the help of a tour guide or a qualified nuclear fallout expert. Visitors must also have safety and monitoring equipment in tow, as well as permits and passports in hand. And although it sounds like a strange place to visit, deemed unfit for human life, people do. However, there are still a lot of areas in this exclusion zone that are highly restricted, like the machine cemetery of Roshka village. Throughout this zone, there are areas marked as forbidden entry zones or radioactive zones. And even if you wanted to play radiation roulette with your life, the government simply won't allow anyone to visit these radioactive areas. And I got to admit, I'm siding with the government on this one. Number 3. Cersei Island. Cersei Island is a relatively new addition to our world. Her first birthday was in 1963 when she was born in a volcanic eruption that happened underneath the ocean. Happy birthday to Cersei. Well, as such, Cersei is the youngest island in the world. It's located off the southern coast of Iceland. The island is stunning with its dark and dramatic colors set against the azure waters. But the island is restricted. Only scientists can visit this place. Why? Because the young island is giving scientists a pretty unique gift. It's showing them how flora and fauna develop in purely natural ways. Cersei emerged from the water on November 14, 1963, but her gestation was around 3.5 years. She was first seen by a cook aboard a trawler. He mistook the island for a boat on fire since there was a column of dark smoke rising into the air. The island was named after Cersei, after a fire Jotun, Surtur, which is a mythological race of Norse giants. Birthed from an underground volcano, the island was completely vacant. So over time, this island is showing scientists the natural colonization of plants, animals, and marine life. And since the island didn't exist before 1963, scientists were able to track how things come to be on the island. To call Cersei Island amazing is an understatement. This sort of thing doesn't happen very often. Islands aren't born every day, so scientists have to be very protective of their young new discoveries. The scientists who are studying the island live in a little hut during the summertime. The winter is way too harsh here, and they are careful not to disrupt or disturb anything on the island while they're there. The island was put on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2008 for the island's own protection. Number 2. North Brother Island. North Brother Island has a double claim to fame. It's home to the infamous Typhoid Mary, and it was the location of the worst loss of life in New York until 9/11. The island is located on the East River between Rikers Island and the Bronx, and even though it's surrounded by a very populous area, the island is vacant. North Brother Island is a restricted area and has been since 1963. Once upon a time, the island was full of people with highly contagious diseases. North Brother Island was where they used to send infectious people to quarantine. This includes Typhoid Mary Malone, a woman with asymptomatic typhoid infection who infected and killed dozens of other people. Malone was the first asymptomatic case of typhoid fever in the United States, and because she was asymptomatic, she refused to believe she was infected. She worked as a cook and was forced into quarantine when it was discovered everyone she was cooking for was getting ill. She was brought to the island and kept there until she died in 1938. Now, normally the fact that the island was a dumping ground for infectious sick people for decades would be enough to win the island a prize for one of the most disturbing places on Earth. But the island also saw one of the biggest tragedies in New York history. In June 1904, a steamship named the General Slocum sank in the East River after bursting into flames. Over 1,000 people died in calamity, and their corpses washed up onto the shores of North Brother Island for days and days. The island was completely abandoned in 1963 after a brief and unsuccessful stint as a drug rehabilitation center for teens in the 1950s. The island is now managed by the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, and it's a bird sanctuary. People haven't fared so well on North Brother Island, but apparently black-crowned night herons do. The island and all its buildings are in disrepair, so it's way too dangerous for the public to visit. Plus, officials don't want the herons disturbed. No one's allowed to visit the island without permission, which is rarely granted given the birds. That and the dangerously dilapidated buildings. Number 1. Poveglia, the haunted island. Keeping with the theme of off-limits, restricted, potentially haunted, and downright creepy islands, let's take a look at one of the most, if not the most, haunted places on the planet, Poveglia. The island's death count is so high that it's actually never been tallied, partly because it's sort of impossible to know exactly, and partly because there's a good chance that no one really wants to know. The island is located off the coast of northern Italy, close to Venice. It's got a troubled and sordid past that all began during the Roman Empire and the medieval era. As the plague swept through Europe, plague paranoia overtook the continent. That sounds familiar. People were so paranoid of the plague that anyone who showed even the slightest symptoms were sent away. Where, you ask? Well, Poveglia. People with the plague were sent to Poveglia to die. People who might have had the plague were also sent to Poveglia, where they inevitably got the plague and died. So there was a whole lot of dying going on here during that time. Corpses were burned, but there were so many corpses that it's now estimated that more than 50% of the island's soil is made up of human ash. So while the exact numbers aren't known, enough people died on Poveglia to make the island half soil, half human ash. Yeah, and it doesn't stop there. In 1922, a hospital was opened on Poveglia. The hospital was for the mentally insane. But because the hospital was so isolated, it's believed that the doctors there got away with some pretty crazy stuff. Rumors have it that the horrific scientific experiments that were performed at the asylum included forced lobotomies. One of the doctors jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s because he had been driven mad by the ghosts of past patients. Poveglia has been vacant since 1968, and today it's a highly restricted area. It's also a mecca of paranormal activity and a cultural icon in the paranormal world. People who have visited the island give reports of hearing mysterious screams and feeling of being watched. Poveglia is one of the world's most illegal places to visit, and it's believed to be one of the most haunted places on the planet. And you better believe it's an amazing place that you are not allowed to go to. We'll see you tomorrow. Watch our Obscure playlist for more top 15 videos about the more obscure subjects in our world. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best and most obscure videos.